Hello, it's Kaylee, and today we're going to be talking about terrestrial versus Jovian planets. On the first slide we have here, a little fun fact is terrestrial planets in our solar system orbit relatively close to the sun, and this gives them their name, which is like the inner planets. So that's why this picture shows the inner planets of our solar system. And on the next slide, each terrestrial planet has a central core made mostly of iron. So as you see in the picture, in the inner, it's iron, and the layer above the core is called the mantle, and it's made of rocks. On the next slide, none of the terrestrial planets have rings. So as you can see in the first picture, none of them have rings, and those are the terrestrial planets. And the one at the bottom does have a ring, so you can kind of see the difference between the two of those there. And the next slide, the terrestrial planets have surfaces that have mountains, craters, canyons, and volcanoes. I just chose this picture to show that it has some craters and mountains, and it's like rocky. It's not necessarily all just flat. And on the next slide, this represents cherries, one dwarf planet considered to be terrestrial type. I'm not sure quite how to pronounce that. It's Ceres, and that is a picture to represent that planet. Moving on to the next slide, we have our Jovian planets. They have a very strong magnetic field due to the high rotation speed. So the magnet represents the magnetic field. And the next slide, I chose a balancing picture because mass for the Jovian planets is more than 10 times than Earth would be. So you can see that that definitely is a big difference. And the next slide, we have that rings are not solid, but they're made up of particles. So as you can see in the background, there is a planet, and all these rocks are surrounding it. So it's not just a solid one ring around. It's made up of little particles that then form a ring around the planet. And the next slide, Jovian planets have very small cores as compared to terrestrial planets. It's just kind of to show the difference between the two of them. And the next slide, they have very, very low temperatures due to that they're farther away from the sun, so that makes it a little bit colder rather than if they were really like close to it, it would be hotter. And moving on, we have some similarities between the two. I chose this picture because both terrestrial and Jovian planets orbit the sun. And on the next one, this may be a little confusing, but I chose this because they have magnetic fields, and this is showing like as like a magnet as what would pull to each side, and they all come in to join together. And the next slide, they were both found roughly around the same time, may not necessarily like the exact same time, but somewhere in the same, anywhere between 4 to 5 billion years ago. So this is just a picture that I found. And the next slide, this is a sphere, and both Jovian and terrestrial planets have a spherical shape due to gravity and where it's pulling them, so it just creates that sphere-looking figure. And lastly, we have this little gear, and I chose this because it shows the directions going the same way, and both planets orbit in the same direction, so they're both going constantly in the same motion. And that is all I have for today, so I hope you enjoyed this video.